What's one point of, working in the building in the food waste space that no one warned you about that you wish you would have known before getting into this space?
I'm sure I was probably warned about or should have been warned about, but is certainly something that's really important to always consider is people find the path of least resistance. They really will. It's probably a universal fact, but I think it's very true within food service operation. You ask Rudy to fill out a clipboard full of data. The easiest way to accomplish that task is to put down some garbage on it, right? There's not a huge incentive for him to be super diligent about it. It's not the way things are built. So when we build our tools, we think about how do we absolutely minimize what we're asking these operators to do, because then the path of least resistance becomes sufficient for what we need. Our StreamLine scales, they are literally one touch. You put a pan on it, you hit the screen once and say, this is what this is. We then do all the work on our side. And what you accomplish there is you aren't relying on asking someone to do something extra in order to have all of these really downstream effects that don't directly impact them. So being really intentional about building tools that minimize what you're asking of the operator is, I think, critical, specifically in food service, but probably in general too.
Adam, welcome to Founders and Empanadas.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Let's dig in.
What do we got?
I got some, I think, chicken empanadas or
chicken and beef.
Mystery meat.
All right.
Cheers. Salud.
Cheers.
How is it?
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, this is exactly what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm playing on hard mode today, one with the white t-shirt. So we'll see if it comes off unscathed.
Good luck to you so
little
far.
Crumbs
Yep. Already thriving.
Amazing, Adam. Well, it's been incredible to watch Topanga's growth over the past 2 years since when we first started working together. And first of all, congrats on all the pivots you've made and really finding that product market fit. And today I'd love to dive deeper into your industry and also just the founding story around how you've made all these iterations to the current form of Topanga.
Yeah, it's great. You've seen a lot of our journey, so it'll be fun to kind of review it in retrospect. And yeah.
Awesome. So let's go way back in the origin story to, I think it was food delivery that you and Paige were doing in Topanga, Kenya. And how did that all start out?
Yeah, the very first iteration of what is now Topanga.io was Topanga Supply, the food delivery market, where we would buy in bulk from local suppliers. We would repackage down into consumer-sized reusable containers. We would run our own logistics routes. We would collect empty containers. We would wash containers. We would refill. We basically did all of the hard things you could possibly do in the food service world all at once.
Yeah. And say more about the kind of that journey and when you realized that maybe it was time for shifting or, addressing a bigger TAM.
Yeah. So part of what we developed was some software for tracking those containers, and then also some learnings around how to communicate with consumers about how to get reusable containers back. And we realized that itself was something that was valuable and could be taken to a lot of existing food service providers that already have a big customer base, have an interested customer base in participating in that sort of exchange where, it's a little bit harder than single use for sure. But there's two sides to this. One is it's pretty gratifying if you want to participate in that and you have the option to, if you're the consumer. And then on the business side, there's real dollars behind operating an efficient reusable container program. You end up making money relative to the counterfactual there, which is you're just going to continue buying single-use containers, which can be, 40, 50 cents per container, depending on what you're purchasing.
Oh, okay. And walk me through how you identified universities as a good starting point, and kind of how you got traction with those first few universities.
Yeah, so early days poking around at different markets once we decided to lift that software out of the market we were operating in. Tried looking at QSRs, small cafes, sort of mass market type opportunities. And ultimately, we got, I'd say, pretty lucky by finding our good first college and university customers. And it became clear pretty quickly that this was a really attractive market for us for a couple different reasons. One is you've got a primed audience. So college diners tend to want options like this. And then if you think about the food service providers or the dining teams at these universities, they kind of manage their whole realm. It's like a semi-closed ecosystem. You've got dorms, you've got different dining halls, you've got cafes. They own the necessary physical capabilities here. So dishwashing, logistics. So they're basically were all set up to do it, and they'd been trying to do it. But what they were missing was the accountability pieces and the software layer that we brought. So we brought the missing piece into these environments, and they'd already perfected all of the physical side of it, and it became really a perfect match.
I love it. And how plug and play is the implementation? I'm curious how customized you get with integrations for each new university launch.
Yeah, so the implementations, you learn a lot about the way that each of these dining programs wants to operate. The biggest variables are, what is the venue focused on? Is it an all-you-care-to-eat dining hall? Is it a retail point of sale? Is there an order ahead app in play? So when we built our integration with Grubhub, that became a really big unlock for taking what we did in sort of more face-to-face exchanges and then making it more digitized where you can order ahead. We can support a retail concept, and you can place an order, pick up a container, and all of the connection of that container to you as an individual, sort of like checking out a library card, was all done back of house. So venues really dictate the ways in which we implement. But at this point, we've seen probably 3, 4, 5 different types of venues. Mm-hmm. And once you build a playbook for each of those, then each new university, usually you're going to see one of those.
Yeah, very cool. My favorite Topanga story was getting a call from a student at Occidental College asking for money. I used to attend Oxy, and me flipping the script on them to ask about their Topanga experience, and it was a pretty effective distraction. Like, they were a huge advocate, and like I've never seen a clearer sign of product market fit where the student trying to ask me for money was instead just went on 15 minutes about how they had to have the reuse pass, and they would.
Oh, I'm happy they were a fan.
Yeah. Yeah, checking out the case study of Oxy, and you're at like 78% usage rate for reuse pass. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the penetration and sort of the adoption, and it's one of our really successful campuses. Yeah.
Are there any factors that you find from campus to campus that dictates adoption rate?
I think one of the big things that drives adoption is really decisions that the dining program makes. So you can force like 100% adoption. That's one path where you can say, hey, we're going to offer to go, and you don't have the choice to get single use. If you want to make it optional, then there's some really interesting levers that these dining programs can play around with. So one of them, which has been really successful at places like Boston University, is you implement a single-use surcharge. So you can choose single use. You don't have to choose reusables, but you get, a $250 charge on your total bill. And that can be enough to push some of those, folks who might not participate all even, but just pushes them over the edge to choose reusables. And we've seen that be pretty impactful when it comes to seeing really high rates of adoption.
Yeah. Doesn't take much for a university student to be incentivized by a single usage rate. So
exactly right. I mean, that's some extra beer money or an extra meal out. Yeah, it can go a long way.
Yep. Awesome. And then what shift allowed Topanga to expand beyond universities into senior living care and healthcare facilities?
Yeah. So one of the things that was really important for us was to nail the fundamentals in colleges and universities. And then, colleges and universities, it's a great market, But, if you look at the size of it, it's not mass market, right? So we understood that we developed something really special. We wanted to take it to other markets and to have a much greater impact. But we weren't ready to do that until we nailed the fundamentals. And once we nailed the fundamentals, then we started taking a look at other markets that shared similarities with colleges and universities. So one of the best examples is senior living. Senior living as a market, it's kind of like college, just on sort of the other end of your life, right? It's like semi-closed environments. You've got multiple different dining options. Everyone sort of lives generally in the same place. It's big enough that it is worth trying to get containers back, and you need to do a little work there. But it's not so big that you have to, go pick up containers across town for the whole program to make sense.
Yeah, it's I've never looked at it that way, but there's a lot of parallels between the kind of the living setup of college kids and and seniors. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Any other kind of next industries you're looking to tackle that have that same kind of density of a population living together?
Yeah, I mean, so those are probably the two best examples for Reuse Pass. If we think about the second product we've built, StreamLine, we start to broaden the aperture a little bit more, and we start to just look at really anything that's a pretty substantial food service operation. And there you start looking at hospitals, corporate campuses, hotels, resorts, those sorts of environments, even cruise ships, which is a really interesting market to think about. But in all those cases, you've got some of the same elements, right, that we talked about with colleges and universities and senior living. You've got a centrally managed food service program. You have operators and planners there who are making decisions in what is inherently a very margin-thin business. And many of them are interested in trying new things to operate more efficiently. And fundamentally, that's what a reusable container program, when it's well run, or what a food waste mitigation program, when it's well run, can do.
Yep.
Help you operate more efficiently, boost your profitability. You're a better food service operation for it.
Yep, I love it. I think we should get into the empanadas to reduce our food waste score.
Should.
I got like 10% of my empanada on my shirt right now, so I'm struggling. But
we can measure that for you.
Yeah. Yeah, cruise ships, that's a pretty fascinating application, because when you've got pretty good data on total number of guests, number of days, it's fixed variables, how granular can you get with the data on kind of estimations of total food supplies needed and food waste?
So, yeah, you make a good point. Like, if you think about, it's a supply-demand equation when it comes to how much food you're going to produce. And how much of that's going to get consumed. The supply is, we're going to choose to make 300 portions of mac and cheese today. And then the demand side is, diners are going to eat maybe 250 portions. Maybe they're going to eat 350 portions, or want to eat 350 portions. In a market where you're not a captive audience, like on a cruise ship, like, your demand is probably more fixed from a foot traffic perspective. Mm-hmm. But even on cruise ships, you see, you've got, plenty of different places where you might eat. And you do see changes in, this particular point of sale or venue saw a reduction in their average foot traffic. Maybe it was cannibalized by other markets. Maybe there's not other markets, other points of sale. Maybe there was a special going on at the Thai place. All those things are hard to predict on the demand side. But generally, there are some really easy things you can do on the supply side. You'd be surprised by how many food service operations, no matter what they try, are just going to have a pretty substantial amount of food waste until they try a tool like ours, where you have really efficient and low-touch data collection. And we can then take that data and turn it around into smaller but really actionable opportunities for these operations and their chefs to make a difference.
Very cool. I'm curious, does your product dive into seasonality or days of the week that might impact the amount of consumption?
Seasonality is big. Weather's also really
Right.
big. If you think about sort of like these external factors that might change what the demand side looks like. Sunny days are great for salads, right? That sort of thing. So, our core is not predicting demand. It's an important part of the equation. Our core is really understanding what happened inside of your kitchen. And if you think about, you at home making empanadas, like you have a really good understanding of how many empanadas you made. So like you can reflect and like, man, I made too many empanadas. Like obvious.
Why did I need 20? What's going on?
Why did I do that? Right. If you're, college and university dining hall or a big senior living food service operation, you've got maybe 5-6 different production lines. You might have 30 or 40 different cooks and assistant chefs working. And if you're the head chef, you don't know what happens in your kitchen. Right. So you don't know that line cook Rudy made 3 times the amount of empanadas that he was told to make. So that visibility is really step one in trying to understand how to make improvements.
Very cool. And Adam, it's been a pleasure to partner with your company on the image labeling side. And I'd love for you to share a bit more with the audience about how you're using that data to improve StreamLine's product.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's helpful just to explain what StreamLine is it's a smart scale. So just like a regular scale, big camera that comes up, and you want to understand how many empanadas you made. You put a pan full of empanadas on there, and then we take some images, we take some weights, we understand the time of day, where this particular scale is situated within your kitchen. And then we can process that data in our cloud to understand exactly what we're looking at. And part of that is integrations with another software system called a menu management system, which allows us to understand that on your menu was empanadas today. So we can make that match between here we're looking at 25 pounds of empanadas, and we know that those 25 pounds of empanadas were the chicken empanadas that were on your menu, right? In order to make that match, we do use AI systems to classify those images. And more specifically, we're using multimodal large language models to feed in prompts about context. What are the set of options that we're looking at? And then some specific other aspects of what would help the model make an appropriate classification there. Now, of course, no AI systems are perfect. There always are edge cases. There's always certain aspects of that classification problem that we may never be great at, or we haven't had the time to invest in getting really good at. And those are really great opportunities for people to help. In my view, my co-founder's view, there is this really effective marriage between smart autonomous AI systems and people that can help augment them. And when those come together, you have a really complete solution that you can present to your customers.
Yeah, it's a big believer in that of, across all of the workflows that we're doing right now with New York, having some sort of AI assisted layer, but still having the human layer as a QA review or just to validate information. And it kind of helps ease both sides of the equation of driving efficiency while also having that just second layer review.
Totally. And it gives you, if you think about like prioritization from a technical or a research side of the business, it gives you space to be focused on which aspects you want the models to get really good at.
Yep.
You don't need to be great at everything right away, right? If you have people that can help you, fill the gaps at what you're not initially great at.
Yep. That's probably one of my favorite Slack channels at New York to peruse through is like the image labeling team. Is this a chicken enchilada? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Some fiery debates that happen in that channel.
I know. Yeah. There's the American cafeteria food is an area that's ripe for thoughts on what things are, because not everything's obviously something.
Right. Awesome, Adam. So walk me through just your go-to-market action and how you have been able to expand and really sell the idea of food waste reduction to these larger facilities.
Yeah, so I think it started early through word of mouth, and that was huge. And I think that was particularly a fact about the college and university market is having initial success with some marquee customers. They talk with each other. It's a beautiful market in the sense that the firms are not super competitive, right? Like they want to help each other out. They're not fighting really for the same customers, right? It's different from some other really competitive, just mass markets that you might find yourself in. So word of mouth was huge there. And then if you think about broadening out what our market opportunities look like, both within CNU, college and universities, but also in these other senior living hospitals, food service providers, and the partnerships that we've built with these big companies like Aramark, Sodexo, Chartwells. These players control a really large portion of these markets by managing the food service operations on a contract basis. So by showing success to them, then we are more efficiently able to scale our footprint because we don't have to always make one-to-one deals. We can work with a food service provider, prove value to them, and then we start to get, 3 or 4 or 5, 10 at a time.
Makes sense. Yeah. And that's a great point earlier about just how fragmented, frankly, the market is for senior living. And they're so geographically focused that there's not much competition between them. So they're easy to share providers with each other. I found a similar setup with other kind of highly fragmented companies we work with.
Yeah, right. And if you find a great vendor, it's like, and you have one of your competitors, like, you don't want to tell your competitor about this really great vendor you found, right? I was like, no, that's my secret sauce. Yeah. Like that's my competitive edge, right? Yep. Specifically within college and universities, it's so great that's not the case. It's like, show everyone, like Ohio State wants to tell Michigan how great Topanga is, even though they're huge college football rivals, right?
Yep. I love it. Adam, and I'd love to hear a little bit more as well around just the founding story and some of the challenges that you've gone through along the way. And on Founders and Empanadas, we like to get into some uncomfortable topics around founder mental health. So maybe walk me through, have there ever been moments where you thought, let's just give this up or let's stick with this smaller scope idea? And what would you say were the most challenging inflection points throughout the whole journey?
Yeah, so my two co-founders, Paige and Max, we've known each other all for a very long time. So I met Max in high school. I met Paige at the University of Virginia. She's now my wife. So we have really, really close personal relationships. And I think that has become a massively valuable thing for us as a founding team. Like, we approach everything with trust. Like, we are, no matter what, long-term partners in life and business, like you name it, right? But it can be really hard when you're so obsessed with your company and you live it, every day. Right. Like you have to when you're building a business, to not have the space to, even for an hour in the evening, take a step back. Because if your partner or one of your best friends is in that headspace too, it's like, what's to stop you from just continuing the conversation and the strategy? Like there is no end. Mm-hmm. So I think, while that's been a challenge, we're stronger for it. But it's not always been easy, right? It's like, you need a little bit of space, right, even if it's for an hour. And It can be much harder to come by when the person you live with is also living the same professional life every day.
Yep. That resonates pretty deeply with me. I grew up with a family of entrepreneurs, and my parents had business together, and it felt like every dining room table dinner was a conference room, and hearing about employees that aren't doing well or whatever's going on. So yep. I know what that looks like.
Yeah, it can get a little ugly sometimes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But when it works out well, it's extremely powerful. Of just being able to deeply understand and trust each other to own different parts of the business and have that clear distribution of responsibilities.
Yeah. And I think it's the trust more than anything, right? Yeah. It's like, I know that Max and Paige don't have ulterior motives, right? Whereas, if you can find great trust in a founding team, I think, where you don't have those really strong personal connections, but there might always be like, maybe he'll go and, take that job that pays him 3 times as much as, what we're able to pay ourselves right now. Those sorts of things might just always be in the back of your mind.
Right. And people say it all the time that a co-founder relationship is like dating anyways. So if you're able to kind of bypass that and you're already married, there you go.
Yeah, post-dating. Already done it.
Awesome, Adam. And I'd love to dive a little bit deeper as well into kind of how you came across the food waste space and why you decided to dedicate, so much of your career towards this. And what was the pain point that you felt that you wanted to address?
Yeah, so I think I have to go back to before starting Topanga. I worked at Sweetgreen for several years, and that was my first really introduction to the business side of food. I mean, all of us are interested in food, right? But to be interested in the business side of food is an entirely different thing. And I mean, I don't have a great reason for why I ended up taking that job. I think it was interesting more so because of the size of the company and the novelty of like applying data and really interesting technology to an industry that hadn't really used it much in the past. But you could have taken that same rubric and applied it to a number of other types of companies. So in some respects, just sort of happenstance that I started working within it. But at Sweetgreen and since Sweetgreen, I've just been really attracted to, there's great problems to solve. And unlike other markets or places you might apply technology where it's purely digital, there is a human side to it too. And you're building tools for real people, which is really gratifying, I think. You're not just moving bits around the internet, right? You're actually putting a tool in front of someone who makes their day-to-day a lot easier. I don't believe that robots are going to be cooking all the food, right? There will always be a human element to this. And if we can build great technology that helps them do what they do, then that's like a really personally gratifying way to build technology.
It's very compelling, and just being able to solve for a serious global issue that we have of mismanagement of food resources, and not just kind of building a BS product around some sort of Web3. There's a really compelling why behind it.
Yeah, I mean, not to disparage the technical problems that are inherent in like building something like that, but yeah, I mean, I think everyone has to figure out what drives them, and being able to say that not only are we building a company that is a success from an economic perspective, but being able to say that we're also making an impact on the world in a positive sense beyond just making money is really important to me. And I think most of the people that have joined us have had some element of that too, like have had the opportunity to go and think about joining a Web3 startup or you name it, right? And ultimately are like, you know what, why not apply my skills and my interests? And then I get this great benefit of being able to see, like, if we're successful, then, I can brag to my friends and family about the fact that I'm making a real impact.
Yep. And, I'd also love to hear a bit more about what part of the mission of Topanga do you find that's most compelling and kind of gets you through the days of running a startup that feel like war at times, that feel a little operationally messy. But what would you say is the most compelling point of Topanga's mission?
So generally, we say that Topanga's mission is to help food service operations waste less and save more. I think that we hear success stories from customers who say things like, "There's a before and after with Topanga. There was a before where I was, getting told by the higher ups that our profitability was terrible, our food waste costs were really high, our paper costs, which is how you would classify your single use costs, are really high. What are you doing to control it? Give me some analysis. Like, what do you know? And they say, I didn't know anything. Like, I didn't know, right? And then there's the post Topanga world where they have access to all this information. It's easy to collect. And we hear things like, it's now magic. Like, I have the answers in ways that they never imagined they would. And I think those really are the customers that I love to build for, is the people who have like a really profound before and after story around like how tough it was to do my job. And I was getting all this flack about how we weren't doing a great job, and I didn't have the tools to make the difference. And then they're just so pleasantly surprised on the other side of Topanga with, I've got all this great access to data and insights and the tools to do my job. And now I'm not just asking for information that no one has, but I'm applying my creative brain and my skill set with an appropriate amount of information to make an impact in a positive direction.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't even imagine how challenging that would be to not have any data to base decisions off of. It's all gut feeling, literally. So.
Yeah, gut feeling, or you think about like clipboards, pen and paper, and like you think about like, I'm a line cook. Like, I'll write down whatever on that piece of paper. If like you want me to just write stuff down, turn in that piece of paper, and then you got a head chef at the end of the day who's got like a stack of 40 pieces of paper that has nothing but garbage in it, and they're sitting there trying to make sense of all this, and that's their input data to their decision-making process. Yeah, it's like a non-starter.
Yeah. I can only imagine, like, 5 tally marks. Is that like, what unit of measurement is that in?
Yeah, it's like
metric system, or
it's like, Rudy, we didn't even serve scrambled eggs today. Why are you telling me we wasted 30 pounds of scrambled eggs?
Oh, Rudy, what's going on, man?
Poor Rudy. I pick on Rudy.
Yeah. Awesome, Adam. And what would you say is the most misunderstood piece of the food waste problem that a lot of people overlook?
Well, I think one thing to understand about it is food waste will never be zero. There's always going to be some food waste because you can't optimize perfectly. And there's also other motivations to, if you think about a all you care to eat dining hall, there's a diner experience coming in there, and you're choosing what to eat, and it's much less attractive to see a pan that's got just like the crusty bottom of scrambled eggs, relative to seeing like fresh, like heaping full pan of scrambled eggs. Right. Like, the latter is going to be much more attractive. So it's never zero, but it really can be substantially improved. And if you think about it, so if you want to put some numbers to it, food waste as a percent of total revenue for a food service operation can be like 2%. And a food service operation can, from a 4-wall profitability perspective, which means like what the sort of the piece of real estate, the team that's working there, the cost of food is all generating, can be like single percentage points of profitability. So, and we can see, up to 50% improvement in food waste through our tools. You're talking about a really profound increase in what your all-in profitability is. And that can make a huge difference, no matter what type of food service business for your mom and pop shop. That's like an extra, $1,000 per week you get to take home, right? Like, that's pretty big. If you're a publicly traded food service operation, you report that you just increased your total profitability by 1%, your stock's going to jump by 2 or 3x, right? Like, so there are huge returns to making an impact there. And it's not like you have to have a really widespread, like complete reduction in food waste. Just needs to be an improvement. And
there's so much low-hanging fruit, I feel like, for people coming from the Rudy clipboard space. So to really make a pretty immediate impact.
Totally. Yeah.
Awesome. What's one point of, working in the building in the food waste space that no one warned you about that you wish you would have known before getting into this space?
Well, here's one thing that I'm sure I was probably warned about or should have been warned about, but is certainly something that's really important to always consider is people find the path of least resistance. They really will. It's probably a universal fact, but I think it's very true within food service operations. So, we go back to Rudy. Like, you ask Rudy to fill out a clipboard full of data. Like, the easiest way to accomplish that task is to put down some garbage on it, right? There's not a huge incentive for him to be super diligent about it. It's just not the way things are built. So when we build our tools, we think about how do we absolutely minimize what we're asking these operators to do, because then the path of least resistance becomes sufficient for what we need. So our StreamLine scales, they are literally one touch. You put a pan on it, you hit the screen once and say, this is what this is. We then do all the work on our side. And what you accomplish there is you aren't relying on asking someone who just wants to go on a smoke break or, whatever, to do something extra in order to have all of these really downstream effects that don't directly impact them. Rudy's very removed from the profitability of the food service operation, right? So being really intentional about building tools that minimize what you're asking of the operator is, I think, critical, specifically in food service, but probably in general too.
It's very well said. And yeah, making it one touch instead of having to get a pencil and do tally marks, that's an improvement to his quality of life right there. So
it is. Yeah.
Awesome. Great, Adam. Well, this is a question I like to ask everyone, but what's one strongly held belief that you have that you'd say 90% of other founders would disagree with?
Well, I think there's a belief that when you're looking at a market to sell a product into, that size is the only thing to look at, or maybe one of the top three things to look at. It's size, and then probably other competitive firms. I think that there's many other levels to market analysis that are really worth paying attention to. And I go back to talking about colleges and universities. And if you were just, doing sort of an academic project on the size of the college and university market, you'd be like, okay, interesting market. Not huge, but pretty sizable. But what you'd miss if you didn't ask a few deeper questions is what I was talking about with the fact that these colleges and universities share success stories amongst each other. Right. So if you can get some early wins, then you're going to really scale your footprint much more quickly than you might be able to in another market where firms keep their prize vendors close to the chest, right? So I think that there are variables like that are really worth exploring and putting research into when you're thinking about new markets.
Very cool. Yeah, the CAC is, underrepresented. If you've got your own customers, your best salespeople telling all their friends about it, then
right. It's it's more nuanced. It's not the TAM might be a little smaller, but the CAC's way lower. Right. So it's on net a really attractive market.
Yeah. It's a totally different industry, but I had a similar experience with my first startup where I was selling towards plumbers, and they're so open to sharing with their plumbing friends in a different market. And it's just such a nice reprieve from where I'm used to working out of tech, where it's forbidden to talk to any competitor at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah. It's great. And it kind of also means that they're really willing to generalize with you too. So they'll say this is how we solve this problem, and you're really good at that for us. But just so you know, we're not the only way that this is done. There's other ways to solve this problem. And if you go and you walk down to Michigan from Ohio State, it's you're going to need to build this in your product to be a better vendor to them. And you just don't get that in markets where things are so competitive, and you don't want your vendors to be just successful enough so they don't go out of business, but they keep prices low to you, right. And they don't give all that help to your competitors.
Yep. Awesome. Adam, any books you're reading right now tied to entrepreneurship or even just unrelated?
Oh man, I I'm not reading a lot right now, but I was reminded of a book over the weekend. It's a book called Conquistadors of the Useless, written by Lionel Terray, who is a French alpinist and put up a lot of really impressive first ascents. And I was up in the mountains this past weekend doing some much less impressive alpinism with some of my friends. Mm-hmm. But I was reminded how I think that there's so many great parallels to draw between trying to climb routes in the mountains and trying to build companies. So I think if you're an entrepreneur, even if you're not interested in the outdoors, going and reading a book about alpinism would be time well spent.
Very cool. And I guess the free solo method is being a single founder, building.
Sure, exactly, right?
Space, but...
And then there's like expedition style climbing where you raise huge amounts of venture capital, have a massive team. And then there's somewhere in between, which is, you've got resources to build a small team, but you move light and fast, and you can be largely unsupported on your path towards whatever the objective is. I think that, you can try and figure out a lot of different parallels in that space, which are interesting.
I guess climbing Everest with a Sherpa would be being an AI rapper. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it works, but not really.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, where can people find out more about you and Topanga online?
Topanga at topanga.io. I have a pretty minimal footprint on the socials, but I suppose LinkedIn is the best place.
Amazing. Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on today, and congratulations again to you and the entire Shout Out Topanga team, your entire growth, and I'd love to see which industry or vertical you go into next.
Thanks so much, Josh. Appreciate it.
Cheers.